Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about Bartle's player archetypes, which is also known as the Bartle taxonomy of players. This is in response to someone, J Extra 1313, who asks, "Hi Tim, there's a well-known rule that there's four types of players: killers, social players, explorers, and achievers. The Bartle taxonomy of player types. Therefore, every game should have things in it to appease each player type to bring in the largest audience possible. How true is this taxonomy in your experience? And is following this philosophy helpful or harmful?" Well, I'm glad you asked because this is something that I've known about for decades and I kind of agree with. And I will talk about that. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of really interesting psychology you can read to learn more about video games. In fact, there is a book I read in the 80s by George and Elizabeth Loftus called The Psychology of Video Games. And even though, it was talking about Pac-Man and Space Invaders, all of it still applies today. So, highly recommend that book. But anyway, back to the Bartle taxonomy, the Bartle archetypes. So, Richard Bartle was, for those of you who don't know, he was a professor in the UK. I think he still is, but he created the first MUD, multi-user dungeon, in 1978. So people have been playing online multi-user dungeons for 50 years? So this is a game that it's all text-based. Imagine playing Zork, but there's maybe a few hundred other people playing with you. He and someone else made these games, and then he started noticing things about the people playing. So let me go through his archetypes. So he had four. I'll just go through them alphabetically. The first one was called Achievers. Achievers were people who liked their progress to be measured. These are people who like meters and bars and percentages. These are people who probably love achievements. I mean, they're called achievers after all. But they've been around since the beginning. These are people who, whatever they do, if they do a quest, they want XP. They want to know how much XP is required to the next level. They want to know what they get at that level. That's what they're interested in, progress. The next type is called explorers. Explorers are the ones who love having a big map. They're the people who love open worlds. They love going off the beaten path. They love discovering new locations. Whether or not they give XP, if they give XP, then the achievers probably like it too. But even if they don't give XP, explorers like this. They just like the act of discovery. They like going somewhere and thinking, oh, this is cool. Look at that vista. Oh, there's a chest up here on this ledge. Oh, there's a secret door here. That's what explorers like. That's what rewards their brain. The next group are the killers. They're not just people who like killing NPCs, but they do, and PCs if it's allowed. But these are the power gamers, the min-maxers, the ones that just want to kill everything and then sort out the loot. They're trying to play the game as, I don't want to say harshly, but they push the game as hard as they can. And they don't care what they have to do to achieve. But it's not so much the achievement that they love. It's the fact that I killed everyone in this town. I have the highest possible attack output for any character. My defense is as high as you can possibly get. Nothing can touch me. Those are what killers like. And then finally, there's the socializers. And socializers mean a little more than just they like talking to other people in the games. These are the people who were there for the storyline. These are people who liked doing the quest to see where they led. Not because they want the XP, not because they want to kill everything associated with the quest. They just like seeing where the quest takes them. They like talking to NPCs. They're the ones that will spend time in an NPC dialogue talking to everyone. In multiplayer games, they like talking to the other players. They like doing things for other players. They're the ones most likely to play the clerics or the people giving out buffs. And I think, while not perfect, I think this Bartle grid, think of it as an axis, captures a lot of players who were in games then and are still in games now. I played a ton of MUDs of different kinds in the 80s, and I got into LP MUD in 1990. In fact, I made a MUD with another grad student when I was at UCI. It was an LP MUD called Wintermute, and we just had fun doing it, but For a variety of reasons. My dad passed away. The topic I was working on for my thesis got completed by somebody in Australia who then did a bunch of white papers on it and extended it in every way I possibly could. And I was like getting frustrated. So I kind of walked away from Wintermute. But some guys who were really active on Wintermute started their own LP Mud called Darker Realms. And they were really good over there. And I ended up hiring one of them. His name was Raceland in the Mud. And his name was John in real life. I ended up convincing him to come out to Interplay and getting a job. And he did Starfleet Academy. He used Gnaw, my engine, and I used his scripting system in Fallout. So it was really cool. He was a really cool, good, very good programmer, really cool friend. But we sometimes would talk about this, about all the different types of players, because I made a really big dungeon with a lot of exploration in it. It had a dimensional gate at the bottom that took you to a whole bunch of different places, and people liked exploring it. Where a lot of other people just like putting in monsters for people to kill and loot for them to get. So I kind of saw the Bartle taxonomy take place in the LP Muds. When EverQuest came out, by the way, EverQuest to me was just LP Mud with a graphical front end. I know the people who worked on another mud type called Deku Mud actually thought that they had ripped stuff off. They had ripped off code. I guess it turned out they didn't. But when you looked at the commands you typed in on the command line in EverQuest, they were things like attack, say, shout. And that's exactly how things worked in the Muds. So it was interesting to me because EverQuest was like, this feels like a Mud that someone just, rather than describe the room, they had a graphical description of the room. Rather than say go forward, you just moved yourself forward, and then you ended up typing in commands. It was very interesting, and I got really addicted. Just like I was addicted to Muds for a while, I got addicted to EverQuest for about, I want to say, 3 or 4 years. Anyway, that happened when I was in at Troika. When I went to Carbine, I happened to talk about those things, Bartle's taxonomy, and talked about wanting to support them in WildStar. And my lead designer and his team, lead level designer and systems, they put together the WildStar paths. This is why I was super confused when people who were at WildStar after I left said, nothing Tim did remained in the game. It shipped with the paths and the exact paths we made. And the paths were based entirely on Bartle's taxonomy. And I can go over them right now. There was the scientist who mapped to the achiever. When you picked the scientist path, you got a little scan bot. And you went around the world, and the scan bot would scan flora. And when you killed something, it would scan it and would collect all this data and put it into a log, a journal you had. And that gave you bonuses when you fought those things. Or when you were collecting things, you got bonuses. Then there was the Explorer, which corresponded directly to the Bartle Explorer path. And we gave this person access to secret locations. And what that meant was sometimes they could find a secret door that no one else could find, or they could find a way up a cliffside. Literally, they would find something that when they interacted with it, these ledges would slide out, and then they could get up to the top. And once that happened, once that door opened or those ledges slid out, anyone could use them. But you needed an explorer to open the door or pull out the ledges. So you needed the explorer around, but then anybody who was around when the explorer did that benefited from the explorer. So people liked explorer. The soldier, which corresponded to the killer archetype, he got access to unique weapons. There were boss encounters that would only happen when a soldier was around. There were like these waves of attacks that would happen because soldiers like killing things, and that gave them a lot of XP and it gave them a lot of challenge, and they liked that. And of course, people who were around at the time could help the soldier out, but those events only got triggered when the soldier was around. And then finally, our social version was called the Settler. The Settler could build structures to help defend towns, so NPCs liked when the Settler would do that. That would give them access to special inventory at merchants in the towns that they helped do those things. They could also build things that would buff other players. So again, players loved Settlers, the social archetype, because it helped them out as well. And this is what we shipped WildStar with. And I thought it was a really cool thing because what I used to tell people were classes were the the game telling the player, here's what you're allowed to do. Here are your skills, here are your abilities, here are the weapons you're allowed to use and the ones you're not. But paths were the player telling the game, hey, here's how I like to play. So it told the game, if you picked settler, it said, hey, I want NPCs to ask me to help defend the town. But if you're a soldier, you're like, hey, I just want a lot of combat. And if you were the explorer, it's like, I like finding cool stuff. Let me discover things. And so the game knew that because you picked the path and then provided these things for you. And what I loved about that, and why I thought it was a really useful thing that was completely orthogonal to classes, where classes told you what you were allowed to do, but paths were you telling the game, this is how I like to play. Give me things like this. Now, do I think the Bartle taxonomy is a perfect model of human behavior? No. I don't think we have a perfect model of human behavior. But are they recognizable to players? Are they relatable? And can they be used to help guide your system design? Yes, they can. They did in the 70s. They're doing it now in the 21st century. So I don't think it could hurt you to read about Bartle's taxonomy and think about it when you design your game. I don't think you should feel restricted or beholden to it in any way. It's just think of it as another tool in your system design tool chest. So JExtra 1313, I hope that answered your question.